Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another Penpot Hands-On. In these sessions, we are live, which means you can ask questions as we go, and I'm going to demo using Penpot. Today, I'm very specifically going to look at UI design with Penpot, and we are going to work on a design from start to finish. So please wish me luck because I'm hoping this is going to work. If you don't know what Penpot is, well, Penpot is an open source design tool that is great for both designers and developers or designer developers. And hey, it might be just the alternative you're looking for on a day like today. So without further ado, let's jump right in. I'll give you the opportunity to ask questions throughout. And so if you have any questions, you can just pop your questions into the comments on whatever platform you're watching on, and I will do my best to answer them live. And if not, you can always jump into our community, the Penpot community, and ask questions there, and I'll make sure I get back to you later. So here is the design that we are going to work on today. Here is one I created earlier. Now, I've done this so that we can see exactly what we're going to recreate and try to create it fairly faithfully. Unless you have any suggestions on how to change it. It's not the most beautiful or exciting design in the world. Now, this is kind of a UI design for like a smart home hub app dashboard thingamy. This is based on a bunch of requests that we've had for UI design and me showing you what you can do with it. So in here, we will have typographies, colors, components, grid layout, flex layout. There's an image in there. There's blurring. There's icons. There's all sorts. So these are all the things that we're going to get to today. So how am I going to get started with this design? Well, you know what I tend to start with is typography, because without text, we don't really have very much content in a design like this. So I'm going to start off by creating a board, and I'm actually going to use a size preset for this. You need a board because anything useful will happen on a board. So we'll go for, oh, that's a bit narrow. I'm really bad at remembering what width boards come up as. Oh, it's too big. Okay, I'm going to resize it automatically. There we go. And best practice, give our board a name. Dashboard. So maybe I'll put these side by side for now. Now I'm going to start off with the text content. So to do that, I'm going to grab the text tool. I'm going to start off by typing in Home Central. Zoom in so you can see what I'm doing there. That's our title. And we've got a whole bunch of other text. You know what? It's going to take me way too long to recreate that text. Just give me 2 seconds. I'm going to... If I spend the whole time typing, you're all going to be bored to death. So I'm going to just grab, in this one I made earlier, just going to grab these texts. I'm holding down the Shift key and the Command key. And this allows me to point and click on specific objects to copy them. So, okay, I'm cheating already, but we'll get there, right? So I've copied those. Now I'm going to jump back into this new one and paste them all on. Great. So we have a bunch of text. It's kind of cheating because I've already got some typographies, but you know what I'm going to do is these are just text right now with some styles on them. There's nothing reusable or repeatable here, and that's where typographies are really useful. So for example, this is kind of display text here. It's big because you want it to be eye-catching. So I'm going to make a typography of this, and I'm going to call it D1, display 1. And so then I will open my typography palette, apply that to there. These are kind of H2s, I reckon. So I'm going to add that one, as in H2 as in second heading level. That's an H2. So I'm going to apply H2 to that. Is this one an H2? Yeah. If you think about H2s, instead of thinking about them in the size of text, it's more actually about the hierarchy of the content. So H2s are the most important like titles below the title of the page. Title of the page here, it's a logo. It's smaller than all the other text, but it doesn't mean it shouldn't be an H1. It's the most important thing on the page. It's the thing that you need to know. What is this page when the page loads? It's Home Central, which is my made up little brand name. So I'm going to add that one and call it H1. Now, next up, we have some H3s. Oh, I'm missing one bit of text here. These are my recent scenes. See, this is why I couldn't have typed it all out, because I can't type to save my life. So these are my H3s. So I'm going to rename that. You see, by default, they're named after the font and the font weight. So that's why I'm renaming them as well, so that they're easier. And it's much more useful if you're working with developers or you're going to develop later, that you remember, oh, okay, this is what this was for. That's an H3. Now, these are just kind of body text equivalent, I guess. So I'm going to call this one body. Oh no, if I'm going to stick with the HTML theme, I'm going to call it P for paragraph. Just edited, right? Cool. So these are all P's. I could pick it from either the left or the bottom. I'm going to pick from the bottom. Now we have some navigation links. So these here, I'm just going to name that. This is not a specific HTML type, so I'm just going to say nav link. So these are all nav links. These are status links or status text. Could always think about what element I would make that dev-wise later on. It's another status text. And these are room names. Oh, there we go. What have I missed? Oh, there's some text here. Now that's display text, isn't it? Is it a bit bigger? Yeah, that's display text. Okay, so we have our text all set up now. Now I think it's probably good to look at the colors too. Now, because I'm picking from a design that already exists here, just because I thought it would be nice for you to see that I'm not making it up as I go along, and nobody wants to see me make up a design as we go along. We'd be here for like 2 days. So I'm just going to pick the colors using the color picker. So it's useful to go to the colors here. I'm going to add a color, and I'm going to add this dark color. That's my secondary background. We don't want to get overly into me being bad at naming things at this point, but trust me, I am. I always change my mind about 1,000,000 times over. This will be my primary background. Now, text colors. We have this. I'm going to zoom in a bit for that. Text dark. And zoom into you. This is a lighter color than this one, so I'm going to say text emphasis. This is going to be just body text. If anyone has any tips on how they come up with names for stuff, I would love to hear it. This is something I always struggle with. Consistent formatting, good names. Have we got all of the text colors? I believe so. Okay, so next up we'll go into these accent colors. So this is accent yellow, accent pink, because they're kind of arbitrary. They're not really semantic in any way. So I could just name them after the colors. Accent purple, and we're missing accent blue. Now I'm going to, this is another color here. Nearly missed that. So that is going to be button background. It's got a nice little set of colors going on here. I'm going to apply these colors to the text. I'm just going to put the background in first. So to do this, I can pick it from here. I can pick it from the left panel as well, or I can pick it from the color palette at the bottom. I like this because it shows me the names too. So I'm going to say that is my primary background. These are body text. Not body text, text. Yeah, body text. See, I named them so badly I can't remember what they are. Text emphasis. Any of them, that's body text. This is my dark text, which is why you currently can't really see it against the background. We'll be able to see it in a minute. If you squint, text dark. Right, so we have our text done. Now let's work on the navigation. So all of the things that are this text that is just laid out on the board right now, these are just positioned with X and Y values. So they're just placed statically, as I like to say, on the board. But when it comes to things like navigation, we often want to lay it out better automatically, make sure that everything's lined up nicely. So to do this, I'm going to add a flex layout. So I'm going to group these elements. I'm going to call this navigation. And I'm going to go into my right sidebar and add a layout, flex layout. Now, what this has automatically done is pulled a layout out that's kind of matches what we already had, but making them evenly spaced. And so these are all aligned, and they're aligned to the top. I want them center aligned, just in case I have text of different sizes. Center alignment means it all sits nicely to the middle. Now, the direction is currently right to left. I'm not going to change. No, I am going to change it. I'm going to be pedantic. So basically, you want the order of these items to be the same as they are in the content. So if you are reading the entirety of the page as a list, if we're thinking about accessibility, so I'm just going to change the order of these. So the home central goes at the top. Just to move these around, I'm actually using the arrow keys on my keyboard. Now I've got flex layout on it, works with grid layout too. I can just move it around. So I have to remember the order that it was in before. Updates, I think devices, then scenes, then utilities, member settings, updates. Great. Now, if you remember before, I had these actually grouped in separate little groups. So there was the grouping with the logo, the grouping with the devices, scenes, utilities, and the grouping with the members, settings, and updates. So these are kind of almost three little flex groups of their own. So I'm going to add a flex group for this one. This is going to be my logo. That has its own flex layout. I'm going to group these together. And these are links. Give them a flex layout. And these ones, you don't actually have to group and then add flex layout. You can just select them all and add flex layout like that. Saves you a step. And these are vaguely settings related links. You see, I'm really fussy about naming my layers as well, because it's easier for maintenance when you come back to it later. You can search for the layer name and find out what it is. It's way easier than just sort of lots of different things called object or text copy or something like that. So I'm going to give all of these their own little flex layouts. Now, the logo, there's not actually anything in there right now to make it a flex layout. I'm going to do, this is a little cheat that I did in that I have added a utilities library here. And actually the only thing that's in this library right now is a bunch of icons. And this was because I didn't want to waste your time showing you how to make icons. Hey, if you want to know how to make icons, you should let me know, because I can show you that. It would just take up too much time right now. So I'm going to drag this little home icon in. That's too big. I'm going to make it like 21. So now we can see some flex layout in action. Right now, it's flowing from left to right, from start to finish. It's aligned to the top. We want to align it to the center. How much spacing do we want between this little icon and the text? Maybe 10. So that's our spacing in between. And right now I want the entire container to fit the content, both in width and in height. And I'm going to change that icon color to the light color as well. Next up, we have these links. Now these are too far away because they've got a default gap between them of 121, a bit too wide. I'm going to try 20. No, a bit too close, 30. And I'm going to do the same for this one, 30. Now you can see that this is currently just filling the width of the content. I'm going to leave it like that for now. We're going to look at the overall layout for the whole design a bit later on. But I'm going to set the flex layout. So right now, these are justified to the start, the left of the container, and it's got a spacing of 121 between them. We're actually not going to have any, actually maybe we'll put a bit of default spacing in case they get jumbled up together. I'll put a bit more in so you can see what I'm doing. And what we're going to do is, rather than it be left aligned, we want, when this navigation is in a responsive design, we want it to fill the full width of the available design. And so I'm going to set it to push the elements outwards. So it's going to distribute the space in between them. So that's justified content in between. And we'll see that in a bit of action later on. Right. I think this is a good point to pause and ask you if you have any questions so far. I might answer them as I go along, but if there's anything that is jumping out at you right now would be a good time. You can ask your question on any of our platforms. Here we go. Typography color palette at the bottom panel. Can those be dragged onto the canvas? Is that its purpose? No, it's not its purpose. So its purpose is more like something to pick. So if you select something, you can then pick the colors or to switch. So I'm going to show the colors from the file library. And so you select an item, an object on the canvas, and then you select one of the options in order to apply it to what's on the canvas. So it's clicking rather than dragging. I hope that makes sense. Do we have any other questions? Okay, great. I'm going to move on to the left sidebar. So let's look back at the original design. So here we have a dark background. Both of these have rounded corners, and there's some spacing between the title and the content, and even spacing between these items here. So I'm going to, first of all, these are just floating random text. So I'm going to give it some layout. So add flex layout there. And I'm going to call this status panel. We'll do the same here. And add a flex layout. And that is my room panel. And actually, I want slightly different spacing between the title and this list, which is, I know it's got 2 items in it, but it could have more. It's a list. So I'm going to group these together and I'm going to add flex layout to those, and I'm going to call these statuses, and the same for the rooms. These are my rooms. Now let's make sure the flex layouts work. Actually, I'm going to give some background color first. Because these are kind of similar, they're not similar enough to make them into components, but I'm just going to give them the secondary background the same. Give them some rounded corners. 30 is too much. And I'm going to give them some padding. What do we think? 30 and 30. Does that look about right? Nope. I think it's more like 20. Okay. And now I've got on this, the default gap between the items is 25. I'm going to make that 20 and do the same for this one. And then the spacing between the rooms. So this is currently, put that in the right order. So this is ordered from top to bottom. They're left aligned. They're aligned to the top. That works for me right now. But currently the spacing between them is a bit too much. I'm going to make that 15. I can see that you see they're much narrower. But the text isn't quite big. The text looks a bit small there, doesn't it? I'll handle that later. Am I recreating it faithfully or not? We'll see. And this battery level and Wi-Fi level. So these are aligned to the left. I'm going to order them from top to bottom. They are aligned to the top as well. And I'm putting 15 in between them. Now, again, I've used icons here like I did with this home icon. So let's pop these icons in. So I'm going back to assets, to the library I added earlier. Now our battery level is going to be, hey, we're going to have full battery today. I'm just dragging these in, and Wi-Fi. There we go. These are both a bit big. So I'm going to, that's to constrain the size so that they stay the correct ratio. I'm at 21, maybe a little littler, 18. Now you see, because this icon is made using strokes rather than fills, when we've shrunk it, it's maintained that same stroke size, which is not really ideal. So I'm actually going to undo that change for a second and show you a little trick. So I've selected my icon and I'm pressing the K keyboard shortcut. Now that changes the way that you can scale. So now when I hover over this, you see I've got this double-headed arrow cursor. And now when I shrink this down to 21, what it is doing is it's proportionally scaling the stroke to the size that I've resized it to. So that's what the K keyboard shortcut does, it proportionally scales. It's really useful if you're working with strokes and text sizes and things like that, where you want to shrink everything inside the container to the same proportions as the container. I'm going to make sure I press K to turn that off as well. And this one, just going to resize it the same way. Now in the design, I've got, they're again in a flex layout where I am floating the icon to the right side of the text. I noticed that I've got these the wrong way around. So I'm just gonna switch those around. And the battery isn't even in that flex group. So I've popped it in there now. So I'm adding flex layouts to these. You can nest flex layouts as much as you like, and it's so helpful because it gives you just ways to control how things react proportionally to the things around it. Things, objects, to be more precise. So this is my battery status, this is my Wi-Fi status. These are both going to behave in the same way. We are going from left to right. I still just like to be very precise about keeping my text in a good order because that will translate to code much nicer. And I'm going to put 15 in between them. Yeah, I don't know if any of you can see what the problem is here. And it's that this is not really aligned. So I also want to make sure that in my flex layout, they are vertically centered. So I think that looks good. Now we've not quite got the same text sizes going on, but I might actually prefer this version. So maybe we'll stick with it for now. Now, Next up, I want to have a look at identifying and creating components, because so far what we've done is we've worked out colors that are repeatable and reusable and typographies that are repeatable and reusable. You can't see, I'm counting these on my fingers. And we've also identified a couple of standalone objects that don't necessarily need to be components unless you're going to reuse them in a different project. But now we're coming to some items that are looking very componenty. And that is these scenes and these devices. Like, they're really similar in their layout, in their color, in their typography. They've all got an icon. So prime candidates for components. So I'm going to create my first component. I'm going to make the goodnight scene first. And this can be my default scene component. So here I've got some text. I'm going to put it in a container, in a group, and I'm going to call it scene. Now I'm going to give this a flex layout, and now it's got a flex layout, I can give it a fill color. And that fill color I'm going to grab from the bottom here, and that is accent blue. So we're getting there. Maybe if I'm going to screenshot this. This is just so we can have a little reference closer. You probably can't see my act of screenshotting right now, but that is fine. You'll just see the magic when I drag this image onto the canvas. There we go. Right. So I'm just going to use that as a little reference there. Okay. So the goodnight scene has an icon inside it as well. And this default one is a moon icon. So I'm going to drag in the moon icon. And the moon icon color is the same as the text color. Oh, I changed the fill of the whole group rather than the color of the moon itself. So I need to select this and I'll pick the text dark color there. Okay. Now I want to add some padding. Me guessing at padding again. Now you can see actually this text, this recent scenes, is actually a title for the whole group. So I'm going to ignore that for now. So we've got our items are aligned to the left inside of it. Yeah. But they're going to be arranged from top to bottom. Now the text size looks a bit funky because that's not big enough. We've probably, let's see, is it 20? Yeah, that looks about right. 20 on either side. Yeah, and is it 20 between? Yeah, that looks about right. The moon isn't big enough, so we're going to make our moon a bit bigger. We're going to make that maybe 40. Okay, and rounded corners, of course. So here we have our little default one. Maybe we've got some more padding on the top there, haven't we? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this multi-padding button, and it opens up the option to apply different padding to each side. And I'm going to put at the top maybe, is that like 60? I think that's close enough for now, and we can tweak it later, but I think that works. It means there's a nice big hit area in there. So we have a good default component here, so I'm going to make that into a component. So that's my component. And you might not want your main components on inside your working file. Probably my preference is to put them on in a different file as a library, but for now I'm just going to stick them in a main components page. Sorry, this is so bright. Let's make you a bit darker. There we go, nice and soothing. Don't need bright grey and dark mode. And I'm just going to copy that component across to here. I'm going to delete this one. And I'm detaching this component because I've just deleted its instance, and I'm going to create it again. There we go. So that's probably the quickest way to move a main component onto a different page that I've worked out. So now I've added a component. I can go into my assets, and in my local library, I have the scene component. And there's my goodnight scene. And I want one for a wake up scene. So my wake up scene. And that has got a cup of coffee. So, where am I going? Icons. Right, so I've got an icon that I've used inside of this component. So this is my component instance with the icon component, and I can actually swap between different icons. If I go here to the component swapping panel, I've got it selected in the sidebar, and I'm going to switch to coffee. Now, because I did tweak the size and the shape of this icon, I do need to do that again. I'm gonna use proportional scaling and scale that up to 40. And make sure its colors is the dark text. Okay, so there we have our wake up scene. Oh, it's a different background color as well. That's yellow. Next up, another one. I've just duplicated that using the Command D shortcut. TV time scene. Anyone else have a special scene for when they're watching TV? I do in my house. And TV. Now, how's that size-wise? Scale that up. And change its color. And this one is pink. And then dinner party scene. How am I doing for time? I'm doing okay. All right. So my dinner party scene uses the cutlery icon. And I'm going to scale that up, though I can't see what size I'm making it. There we go. And I'm going to apply the dark text color to that. And that one is purple. So now I have these 4 scenes. They're slightly uneven and funky looking. I'm actually going to make them align to each other with, you guessed it, flex layout. So I'm adding a flex layout. This has lined them up automatically and put it's guessed at the spacing that I want between them. So I'll call this scenes. And the scenes are going from left to right. So I'm just going to use the arrow keys to reorganize them. The spacing between it, I'm thinking maybe 15. Yeah, that looks about right. And we've of course got this recent scenes text. Now with this recent scenes text, it's actually part of the scenes like information. So I'm going to group them together, and I'm going to apply, you guessed it, a flex layout. So adding a flex layout. You see automatically it's put it to the left, so I'm going to run it from start to finish. I'm going to give it a background. It's got that. Oh no, it hasn't. Has it got a background on it? No background. But what you can see is that this title should be overlaying the first scene. Now the reason I did this was it just is a good way of saving space. And also that's why I've added the padding in here so that you can leave space in there. But it's not lying in the right place right now because of the flex layout. But what I can do is I can pull it down into the correct space using a negative margin. If you're a developer, you might know this trick from CSS, but you can do it in Penpot. You don't need to know how to do code. So here I have in the flex element section, I have the margin options. So I can put both top and bottom margins together, or both right and left margins together. But I'm going to look at them individually again. Now, you think about negative margins, what I'm doing is I'm using the bottom margin, I'm going to pull it down. So for that, I'm going to put minus, now I'm guessing here 50? No, maybe 30. You might not be able to see the outline of the text is there. And I might want to put a bit of, no, I think we'll be okay. Oh, right, But you can't see the text. And that's a problem because you're like, how do I control the layering on this? And the answer is with the Z index. So by default, everything has like the equivalent of 0 Z index. Everything is lying on the same 3D plane. And I want to pull this thing up on top of everything else. So I'm going to give it a Z index of 1. And that's what it does. If I do -1, it will push it down. If I make it 2, it will be higher than 1, and so on and so forth. And now because this isn't very nicely aligned, I'm going to add a left margin as well, 20, which makes it all nicely lined up. Now, I think effectively for this set of active devices, they're pretty similar layouts to the components above. There's just one more. So I'm just going to duplicate these and call this devices container. And I'll just adjust it from there. So I'm going to do another little screenshot situation so I can see what I'm copying. I have to keep shifting backwards and forwards. Okay. So we have big light, desk lamp, the TV itself as a device. We have a stereo. And we have another one. I'm going to just duplicate this last scene. You see it automatically aligns it perfectly with the others because it's inside a Flex container. And I'm going to call this mirror light. And now to just switch out my icons. So this is a bulb. And this one is a musical note. I'm doing very well at remembering the icon names today, even if I do say so myself. This is a desk lamp. It's a bulb. So let's switch that for a bulb. And big light is obviously a bulb. I'm going to tweak the size of these all at once. Oh, although not the TV because it doesn't need it. And I'm making sure I've got proportional scaling on, make sure I can see the size to reference. And these are all going to be 40. That's been too clever with the snapping. Come on. Why not? I'm going to just nudge it like that. That's an easy way of doing it. Sometimes when you want to be really precise, it's easier just to enter the values in rather than trying to be precise with your mouse and your hands. Now I want to change the selected color of those to the dark text color. And then we have it, although these are all currently called scene when they're devices. And you know me, I like to have good, precise layer names. Then when someone I work with comes back to look at this later, it makes sense. Now we want to, I've got to hurry up a little bit, Laura. We're going to add in our buttons. I'm just going to move these and delete that text. This is not going to be too distracting for later. Now in this design, we have a couple of little buttons. The idea is that if there's a lot of recent scenes or a lot of active devices, we can scroll them on and off the screen. And so I'm going to make some buttons for that. Now the basis of these are some arrow icons. So here is my arrow icon. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? Just copying that. I'm actually going to make this component from the main components page, speed up the process. So this is a nice big arrow. And it's going to have the color be nice and bright. Now I want to add a background and I want to position this icon in the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to group it. So that's putting a container around it for the button. call it button. I'm going to add a flex layout. So now I can add a fill to it, which would be the button background fill. Now it's round, so I'm going to add very rounded corners to it. Oh, that's padding, not the rounded corners. The rounded corners up here. So I'm going to add very rounded corners there, and I'm going to add padding as well. 20 is too big. And there we go. We've got a nice round button. Turn off proportional scaling. I'm going to create that into a component. Now, when I go into my front page, I can grab this component button in here, and I've got two of them. So one there and one there. Now, these buttons should be with their containers. So I'm going to pop this into the devices container. And I'm going to pop this one into the scenes container. Now this is aligned wrong because of my title being on top of my scenes. So I'm actually going to wrap the scenes themselves and this button in their own flex layout. Scenes and button. Oh, I accidentally hit the slash key and hid the UI. And then I'm going to position that from left to right. And I'm going to make sure that they are center aligned. And I'm going to pull that button in with a negative margin on the left side this time. 20, so it's overlapping. Maybe I'll do a bit more. I can't remember what was in the original design. So I'm just going to freewheel for now, for the sake of time. And the same here again, adding a flex layout. Devices plus button. Making sure that it's aligned from left to right and center aligned. And then negatively pulling this button into the left margin, which was -40. So there we go. We've got our little carousel style thing. Yeah, I actually like what I've done now better than that. So I'm just going to keep it like that. Right. I think, yeah, now is going to be a good point for more questions. If anybody has any, you can ask your questions in the comments section of whatever platform you're watching this on if you're watching us live. About when we were adding colors to the text, is it possible to assign the colors to the typographies instead of selecting one by one? No, right now your typographies and colors are treated separately. If you wanted to create a typography with a particular color assigned, I would do that by taking a bit of text, like default sample text, adding a typography to it, adding the color to it, and then create a component. Because then you can replace the text in a component easily, and it will still keep that same typography and that same color. So I think that's probably the best technique for it. You're kind of creating a whole new design pattern outside of it. Do we have any other questions? No way to make the newly selected icon follow the style of the icon in the component. Yeah, what I could have done is create another component from that icon component with the color applied and the size applied, and then I could have switched them out and it should have taken those new styles. So yes, you can do that. I didn't because my brain decided not to work then. Any other questions? It would be nice to find a tip to quickly reverse the order of elements when creating a flex layout, not just reversing the flex direction. Yeah, it would be pretty cool if we could have a keyboard shortcut for that or something. Yeah, I agree. I think because for development and for accessibility, like when the code is on the page, we want the text to be in the correct order, because if you think about someone who might be like understanding the screen programmatically, like using a screen reader or something like that, their software will read the contents of the screen to you in the order that it is on the page in the code, not according to your design layout. And so it's really important that it makes sense so that everybody can enjoy the content in the same way. Right. Do we have any other questions? Otherwise, I've got to hurry up and do some layout. Great, right. So I'm going to move on next to this little image section here, where we have a kind of rainy background. Now, I'm trying to remember how I did that. Okay, we're going to start off by laying out these elements. So these are all grouped together in a flex layout, and I'm going to call it outside. Now, the order of these, if we look, we've got an icon as well, a little rain umbrella icon. Where's my umbrella? Oh, it's in the weather section. Umbrella. Change the color of our umbrella, not the background color, the actual color of the icon. And pop that inside this flex layout. Okay, now at the top we have outside and rainy. So I'm going to group those and call that top because they're aligned to each other. And at the bottom we have the temperature and the umbrella. So I'm going to group those in the flex layout and call that end. And the outside board itself is going to be organized from top to bottom. Oh. There is 1,500 pixels in between these items. Let's just make that 0 for now. And so it's hard to see that text. Let me apply a background color so we can see what I'm doing. Okay. Now we have some rounded corners there. And we, of course, will have some padding going on. Now the end is above the top. So something going on here. Right, we're organizing from top to bottom. We have that. We're going to have 20 default gap between them. They're aligned to the left. That's fine for now. They're aligned to the top. That's fine for now. So we switch these around. Now, there's 706 pixels between these. We don't need that. We're going to make it 30. But what we're going to do is we're going to push them space between so that they sit on the outside of each other. It's quite hard to see that in effect here, but you'll be able to see it on this one because these are a bit narrower. So here I'm going to put the space between on there too. And I'm also going to make these fit the width of the container. So there now you can see they're being pushed to the outside. I'll do the same for this one. So it'll be in effect when the container is wider. But when I'm making these components, I don't tend to think too much about the layout because I know what it's going to be. But I'm just going to make this a bit bigger so we can see what we're doing. And what I also want to do is push the tops from the bottom so that the top content sticks to the top of the container and the bottom content sticks to the bottom of the container. So I'm going to use space between, but that way. So there we go. Next up, we have the images. Now, I have a little trick for this. I'm going to add a board. And this is going to be my image. The thing about a board is it allows you to clip things. And so it's really useful if you're adding an image to it. The background for my board is going to be an image. You're not going to be able to see me picking this image from my operating system, but you can trust that I am. So there's my rainy image. That's going to be my background. And you know what? I'm going to add the text emphasis color, maybe blue, on top of that image. But I'm going to make it like 80%. So it kind of has a nice color fill over the top. That'll work on the web as well. And then I'm going to position this absolutely so that then it will sit behind all of the rest of the content inside this layer. And make sure this content is clipped. If it's clipped, it means the rounded corners will apply to what's underneath. And I'm going to make sure this is Z-index pulls it on top of the image. Now, because this image is independent from the rest of this content, I can apply a blur to it, and it's not going to affect anything else in the content. And so that way I can add a slight blurry background effect too. Now, I think we've got to the point, before I run out of time, that we're going to introduce the grid layout. So here goes nothing. So here I'm going to, what's the best way of doing this? When I'm making grid layouts, what I like to do is create a separate board. And I'm going to give that board the primary background. This is Dashboard Mark 2. And now I'm going to apply my grid layout to this board. So what is my grid layout? So it's not 2 by 2, is it? It's more like there's 2 columns, kind of, because this is a column and this is a column. And we've got a row here, a row here, and a row here. Or maybe it's 2 rows here. So we've got 4 rows and 2 columns. So I'm going to, in my grid, I'm going to add, I've got 2 columns there, I'm going to add 4 rows. Now the top row is going to be the size of the navigation, which will be about 50 pixels, I think. And then this is much taller, this row, than the next row down. It's in fact 2 times the height. So I'm going to make this one, oh, go back to editing the grid. It's going to be 2 to 1 and 1. Now this spans just one of those cells, whereas this spans 2 rows. So I'm going to select both of those. I'm going to select the top row, and I'm going to give it manual grid cell positioning. And this is saying span the 3rd line to the 4th line. The 3rd line is here and the 4th line is here, but I want it to span the 3rd to the 5th. So that's 3, 2, 5. So there we go. And the navigation, that spans the entirety of the width of the layout. So I'm going to select this first cell here, and I'm going to go to manual again. Now I want it to go, right now it's going from the 1st grid line to the 2nd grid line. I want it to go from the 1st to the 3rd. So I'm going to type 3 in there, and now that's spanning the whole width. Now sometimes it's easy to remember the purpose of these cells if I give them a name, and I can do that in the area section. So I can call this nav, and you see it's highlighted it and says nav here. I can call this one scenes. I can call this one devices. Here is rooms, and here is statuses. And this will show up in the code as well. So it's really useful to be able to assign things to these spaces. And now I'm going to start popping my content in there. I'm just going to copy it in right now. I think that's one of the easiest ways to do it. So I'm going to select the grid cell and paste my navigation in. And my system status goes in here. And my room panel goes in there. And my outside section goes in there. My scenes container goes in there. And my active devices goes in there. Done. So I've deleted the original one. It's not quite taking up all the space that we want it to, though, is it? And actually, I kind of like the width orientation is slightly different here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my grid. And you see here, this is 1 and 1, which means they'll be exactly the same width. I'm going to make this 1 to 3. There we go. So that's a bit nicer proportions. And currently it's set so that the contents of each cell will stretch to fill that space, but we need to tell the flex layouts to do that as well. So I'm going to select this flex layout, and I'm going to make that full width. And I want to keep it the height. I need some padding on the top and the bottom there as well, doesn't it? So I'm going to, oh, it's got no padding on the sides either. So these are margins. Yeah, I'll do it with the margins there. So I'll give that maybe 20 and 20. That's too wide for the available space that I've given it. Oh, there we go. I was editing the grid layout, not the flex layout. There we go. So 20 and 20, 15 maybe. And that's gone a bit wider than we want it to. There we go. And this one, I want it to be the full width of the space, but I still want it to fit the available space. And I want this to be the full width of the space, but I still want the height to be the height of the contents. This outside container, I want that to be full width and full height. Now look, my image has exceeded the height and width, so I'm just going to change the size of that as well. And this is going to be full width, full height, full width, and full height. Now that's just the containers. I need to make sure I also do it for the flex layouts inside of there. So that's full width and full height. And inside this section, full width and full height. And inside of there, full width and full height. And inside of here, full width and full height. And you can see that these are just fitting the available space. They're not filling the space that they could. So for each of these components, they're currently a fixed height and width. I want them to fill the width and fill the height. And the same for these next ones as well. I want them to fill the width and fill the height. Now that's all. Actually, maybe I'm going to make them the height of the content. I think that's a little bit tidier. Okay. That one should be full. There we go. Height of the container. Now we've got a little bit of funkiness going on here, and there's no space in between each of the columns. There's no room for it to breathe. And so I need to edit that in the grid itself. And I'm going to put 15 pixel grid gap there and a 15 pixel row gap. Maybe 15 or 20. 20 looks a bit better. And maybe I'll do the same around the outside of the grid too. I'm going to resize that to accommodate that right now. So we're getting there. I've got the proportions are a little bit skew with. So what can we do about that? Oh, there we go. We've got a fixed height in there. So we want to make that the content height, the content height. This one's going to be the height of the content, but make sure that's also the height of the content. There we go. Got a little bit of an alignment issue there that's maybe to do with my negative margins. There we go. So make sure we're offsetting that nicely. 10 and 30. Do the same for this one. 10. Is that the wrong way around? 10 and minus 30, 10 and minus 30. That's it, they're filling the space much better now. I'm now actually, am I changing my mind about making these full height? The indecisiveness. But we're getting there. And we have got 1 more minute to go. And so I better wrap up. I should have looked at the time before then. The one thing I haven't shown you is how to do this borderline. And so if you join me afterwards, I will show you in the Penpot community. There's a thread for this event, and I will show you a little demo of how to do that in there. It's using Flex. That's a top tip. Now, I want to, if you have any questions as well, any follow-up questions, I'll make sure I jump in the chat afterwards and answer any questions that you've got. Or you can ask me in the community too. So the next hands-on demo will be on January the 29th, where we will be looking at plugins and libraries. Now, speaking of plugins, there is a plugin contest currently on for Penpot plugins, and you can enter. The first prize is $1,000, and there's 20 honorable mentions that will each get a prize of $200. The deadline for the plugins contest is just next week. It is the 15th of December, 2024. So make sure you get in and enter. There's some really great plugins there already. The URL for that is penpot.app/plugins-contest. So you can find all of the information there. You can get all the latest updates from Penpot by signing up for Penpot, and it's free, so you should go do that, but also by following us wherever you are watching this or on any of these social channels. And yeah, make sure you sign up for Penpot, and I will see you next year. Goodbye.